I would ask you a question. Who decides when life begins?
Well, thank you for the question, Representative Roy. It's nice to see you. I'll remind you that we overlapped at the University of Virginia many years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm actually in my friend's son's bedroom. I'm on vacation with my family. The question of when life begins is an essentially personal question. It is often informed by the individual religious beliefs and moral beliefs.
Sure. Hold on. I know, because I'm limited. I'm sorry. You know I've got limited time. Hold on, Professor. I know we've got limited time. Who, as a matter of law, who decides when life begins, and who decides when and how life is protected?
The Constitution does not speak to the question of when life begins, just that it doesn't speak to many other things, including the right to an abortion and executive privilege and qualified immunity. So it is a personal decision.
In the absence of the Constitution specifically saying when life begins, then who best to decide when to protect life? The people or courts?
Representative Roy, as you know, the question of when life begins is a personal question informed by religious beliefs. Our Constitution in the very First Amendment says emphatically that the government shall not endorse any particular religion. It shall not establish. But
Professor, when we have life, when we just make decisions about protecting life, which we do all the time, if a 3-month-old infant is murdered, we protect that life. If a 50-year-old is murdered, we have laws across the country that protect that life. We make decisions about when life begins. My simple question is, as a matter of law, is who decides when we protect life, and whether or not that is judges to decide that moment, or whether that is elected representatives elected by the people?
Well, Representative Roy, as you say, we have laws. Those laws are written by our representatives. We also have fundamental rights. And as you have noted, these fundamental rights are not unfettered, but they do allow individuals to possess certain freedoms. For example, the Second Amendment right, despite the fact that we have prohibitions on murder, allow individuals to bear arms. Indeed, sometimes to effects that are incredibly deleterious.
So, Professor, let me ask you this question. Do you think Brown is settled law? Brown versus Board of Education. Settled law. And you think then Plessy was not settled law and Brown righted it?
I think that Plessy versus Ferguson espoused a doctrine of separate but equal that was absolutely antithetical to the principles of the Equal Protection Clause.
But the question here is, do you agree when Justice Kagan in her confirmation proceedings, she said there were 2 ways to amend the Constitution, through Article 5 or through the judiciary, through the courts. Do you agree with that statement?
That is typically how we have amended the Constitution in the past.
So in other words, so that it can in fact be amended through judicial action. As Justice Marshall said, do what you think is right and let the law catch up. What I'm trying to get at here is when we're talking about judicial activism, we're talking about the court creating law, the court making the decision. The whole question here is who gets to decide. And I think that is what's fundamental. Let me ask you a quick question, Professor Murray, we're going to run out of time. Do you think that the Heller decision, District of Columbia versus Heller, is settled law?
I think the Heller decision is one that was decided by this court.
Yes or no? Is it settled law?
It is settled law, but it seems to have been expanded.
And is McDonald v. Chicago settled law?
McDonald v. Chicago merely incorporates the reminders of the Second Amendment to the states through the 14th Amendment.
The questions here are simple, Professor. Are they settled law? Shelby County versus Holder, settled law.
Shelby County versus Holder simply eliminates the preclearance formula.
But I know what the case does, Professor. I know what the case does. Is it settled law?
It is settled law.
Thank you. And is Citizens United settled law?
Citizens United provides that corporations have a First Amendment right.
I know, Professor. I know you're a professor, and I know you can recite what's in the cases. I'm asking if these are settled law. I think my point here is simple. My point here is simple. Professor, my point here is simple. The question here is who gets to decide? Who gets to decide these fundamental questions? And I think
time of the gentleman has expired. Time of the gentleman has expired, Ms. Dean.